It's 69 degrees.
We have a great program for you today, so get your Bibles and gather your family. It's time to begin Fabric of Family.
How do you explain? How do you describe?
In Him, all families are blessed. Join our discussion on Fabric of Family.
You know all our hope.
Rebecca Sedgwick was a young 12-year-old girl that went to school just like any other normal girl would, and she decided that she liked this guy in her class. So she began to date him, and she noticed that two of her friends really started being mean to her, and she really didn't know why, but eventually it clicked. It was because of this new boy that she was dating in her class and that her friends really liked. And so they began to be really mean to her. They began to bully her verbally. They began to say hateful things to her. And so Rebecca went home to her mom, and her mom said, just ignore them. Just be yourself and do well in school, and so everything else will take care of itself. So Rebecca, she took the bullying, and she took it, and she never retaliated, but she had had enough. She said, Mom, I want to move schools. So her mom allowed her to do that. And so she moved schools. And this was right at the time when Facebook was getting popular, and so she got a Facebook page. And as usual, as we all are with our Facebook pages, at first we're very fascinated with it. She was getting her profile picture just right, and she was posting on people's walls, and she was sending friend requests like crazy, and she was all over the Facebook scene. And the two girls that were at her other school found out that she had a Facebook page. And so they found her on Facebook, and they began to bully her. And then she thought that since she moved schools that she got away from that, but she obviously didn't. The girls kept on and kept on and kept on bullying her until Rebecca couldn't take it anymore. Finally, on October the 12th, 2013, Rebecca Sedgwick jumped off of a cement plant and committed suicide at the young age of 12. Why? Because her friends, two of her friends, bullied her verbally. But the verbal bullying didn't stop there. It continued when she got a Facebook page. And they kept on and they kept on until Rebecca finally took her life at the age of 12 because of cyberbullying on Facebook. The two friends were found. Their Facebook pages were found, and it was confirmed that these two girls did bully Rebecca Sedgwick. These two girls were arrested. They were both 12 years old. They were arrested, put in juvenile detention, and charged with a third-degree felony of aggravated stalking as well. So these girls were taken to juvenile detention. They stayed there for a long time, and they were finally released at the age of 16. Rebecca Sedgwick's story is a story to all of us young people. We can never be too careful of what we put on Facebook, what we tweet, the pictures we post on Instagram, the vines that we post. It's never, never, ever, we can never be too careful of what we put on social media. Now, I'm not saying that all social media is bad. I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. In fact, social media can be used for many, many good things. They can be used to evangelize. They can be used to bring others to Jesus Christ, and that's great and that's wonderful. But social media, just as easily as it can be used for good, can also be used for bad and to belittle others who are made in the image of God. James would write in the book of James chapter 3 and verse 9, he's talking about the tongue in this context, but he says in verse 9 that he says, with the same mouth we bless our God and Father, and we also curse those who are made in the similitude or in the image of God. And in verse 10 he says, my brethren, these things ought not to be so. He says, with the same mouth we bless God, and we curse those who are made in the image of God. I'd like to submit to us that our social media accounts are the exact same way. With the same social media account, we bless God. With the same social media account, we post Bible verses. We post the worship service times at our church. Come and join us for worship. But with that same social media account, we belittle those. We make fun of those who are just like us, who are made in the image of God. The book of Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29, the Apostle Paul writes that, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but only what is necessary for edification, that it might impart grace to the hearers." Basically what Paul is saying is let nothing bad come out of your mouth, but only what is good and necessary for the edification or the building up of the believers, that you may impart grace to those who hear you. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your social media accounts, but only what is necessary for edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Just like Rebecca Sedgwick, killing herself over something as simple as Facebook bullying by two of her friends. Let us always remember her story. Let us always be wary. Let us always be careful of what we put on Facebook, the pictures that we post, the things that we tweet, so that we may impart grace to those who see our social media accounts.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that segment by Harrison Chastain. In our discussion panel today, I have invited Stefan Darby to come back on the program and to continue a conversation that we began on the last program regarding the influence of technology on the home. Stefan Darby is the owner of Advanced Information Technologies in Florence, Alabama. He's also an elder at the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, where I preach on a regular basis. We're delighted that Stefan could be back with us to help inform and educate us as parents and grandparents and kids alike of some of the dangers that are presented through the mediums such as the internet, cell phones, computers, and activities that are associated with them. But before we continue our interview with Stefan Darby, Kyle Budd of Apologetics Press is going to offer another family faith builder. Kyle?
God of our fathers raised, and the God of our fathers praised.
If you were to walk down a beach and look down on the sand and see a computer, and pick that computer up and press the on button and see that it functions well, you would know that there had to be some type of intelligence behind the design of that computer. Well, you probably understand that the human brain is the most powerful computer in the history of the world. It makes any computing system that humans have ever designed look like a kindergartner's toy compared to the processing capability of the human brain. In fact, it's suggested that a single human brain has so many computing functions that if you were to take every single personal computer that is in existence today, the human brain in one day of computation and work would do the equivalent of the work that's done by every single personal computer in existence today. Now, that's a powerful computer. You and I both understand. But what we found out, in fact, we found it out in research that was done in 2013, is that the human brain is even more of a supercomputer than we thought. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. There are cells in the human brain called dendrites. And for years, scientists and neurobiologists and neuroscientists thought that these dendrites were simply passing along information. They didn't think they tabulated anything, didn't think they did any computing. They just thought that they passed information. Well, recent research shows that these millions and millions of dendrite cells, they're not just passing information, they're computing information. The supercomputer of the brain is even more super than we thought. One neuroscientist said that it's the equivalent of finding some type of alien technology. He said, maybe you go to Mars or the moon and you find a computing system and you think, wow, how in the world does this work? And you think that this computing system is amazing and it's technologically advanced. And then, as you're reverse engineering it, you realize that things that you thought were just passing along information are actually computing information. You You see, the human brain is a great example of evidence that shows there is an all-powerful, all-wise, all-knowing designer behind the creation of the world, and specifically the creation of the human body and the human mind. As David said in the Psalms, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. The human brain is absolutely wonderful evidence for the design of God. I'm Kyle Butt with Apologetics Press, and this has been a family faith builder. Thank you for being with us.
So glad that you are joining us for our family discussion roundtable today. I have with me Stefan Darby as a guest. He was with us in previous programming, and we were talking about technology and specifically pornography and how this has had an adverse effect through technology on the family. And there was just so much material that we wanted to discuss. We have invited Stefan Darby to be back with us today. Stefan, it's good to see you again. Thank you for joining us on Fabric of Family. And for those perhaps who did not see the previous program, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and how it relates to technology.
Sure, Barry. I have been working in the technology field for over 30 years now, so I have a lot of experience with technology and continue to work with it, on a daily basis. And, what we had talked about earlier is that the internet has changed so many lives. It's been one of the largest changes that I have seen in technology, and there's a lot of good things about it. It's a great tool for us to use in research. It's a great tool for us to use as a media venue to get information out. But it also has a bad side, and that is that it can also be used to fuel an addiction called pornography that we're talking about today.
Well, this is certainly something that parents are having to think about more so than perhaps generations before, because of the fact that technology is something that is so accessible to each and every one of us. And I mean, children, even from the time they're just a couple of years of age, they can take an iPad, or they can take some kind of a laptop or a phone, and they can learn how to go from page to page and play their games that are on there. And so this is something that parents and grandparents need to be more informed about. Would you agree with that?
I would. And statistics tell us that the majority of pornography is accessed from the home, from within the home. And when you think about all the devices that access the internet, our computers, our tablets, our smartphones, and like you said, that children have those devices and they are very comfortable with them, then you may have children within your home that if they do not have the appropriate filters and restrictions put in place, they may be accessing pornography right there within your home. And it's the parent's responsibility to see that does not happen.
Well, I want us to talk about what parents or grandparents can do to help protect and shield their children from some of the adverse influences of technology. What are some things they can do?
Well, first of all, just to be aware of what can happen and what can go on. The majority of parents don't even know what their children are doing with these devices. They don't monitor what their children are doing with computers and tablets and smartphones, and they have not put any filters or restrictions in place.
Why do you think that they don't know what's going on?
I think a lot of it is just, it's an area that maybe when we think about the age of our parents and grandparents now, we did not grow up with technology like our kids are, like the generations are now. So, if it's something that we're not familiar with, then we don't have a comfort zone feeling with it. And we just don't know what it's capable of doing. And there's two things that are important if you're a parent or a grandparent. First of all is to have the appropriate filters put in place to restrict your children and your grandchildren so that they cannot access pornography over the internet.
All right, let's start with that. If someone has a desktop computer in their home that is accessible to family members, or a laptop computer in the home, what do you mean by filtering software?
There are numerous software brands that you can look at, and you can research these on the internet, but they have been around for years. They're very mature software packages, so they're not problematic, and they have annual subscriptions to them, but what they do is they have different categories that are filtered out. Pornography is just one of those categories, but they have different categories, and it prevents that computer or that smartphone or that tablet from accessing a website that would fit within that category. And if we're talking about the category of pornography, then the user of that computer would not be able to go to a pornographic website. So it's important, and there are different software packages that work on computers versus those that work on smartphones, like an iPhone or an Android device. But it is just as important to protect those devices.
Well, that's what I was going to follow up with and ask you, are these softwares also available for these mobile devices such as our cell phones?
They are. Now, the packages that run on the mobile devices, they are not as mature as the software packages that run on computers. So they may be more error prone, they may have more problems. Now, the second thing that we have not talked about that is just as important, you can have great filtering software, but it's not going to be 100% accurate because of all the new websites that come online every day. So in addition to filtering, you also need to be monitoring what your family members are doing within your home. And these packages, they will actually generate a log, a report, to where you as a parent or a grandparent, you can see all of the websites that your children or grandchildren are visiting and all the members within your house. And this is not just an issue with children. We as adults, we are not above temptation and we are not above sin. So we need to have those safeguards in place for ourselves as well, not just our children and our grandchildren, but for ourselves as well, so that we are guarding our hearts against temptation and against going to these sites that we should not be going to.
So should a spouse, a husband or wife say, well, my husband or my wife, that's not anything that will ever enter into their life?
Barry, if we don't have safeguards between us and temptation, then we have put ourselves at considerable risk. And we have put ourselves, because we are all vulnerable as people, and we're all tempted in different ways, and none of us know what temptation is going to turn into an addiction. So to have the attitude that I'm not going to be tempted with that, or I don't have to worry about that, or I don't have to worry about my spouse being tempted with that, is a very naive attitude.
There's a lot here that we need to talk about further, Stefan. I'd like for you to stay with us for just a moment. But before we continue our discussion, I'd like to watch another segment by Jim Merle, who is one of the preachers for the Ironton Church of Christ in Talladega, Alabama. Jim does a regular segment for us called Family Fortune of Faith, and today he's going to talk about worry. So let's watch this segment together along with our viewers. Then we'll be back to continue our discussion with Stefan Darby.
Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto.
Do you consider yourself to be a worrier? Oftentimes when we think of worry, especially we as Christians, we think that when someone worries, they're simply showing a weakness. But biblically speaking, that's not the case. Worry is not a simple weakness in God's eyes. Sometimes at least, it can become a wickedness. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me. It's not every worry that we have, not every concern that matters to God in that way, but it's when we continue to worry. When we continue to worry about the things that God is ultimately going to provide for us. The Bible teaches that. As a matter of fact, Jesus, in the midst of His Sermon on the Mount, as recorded in Matthew chapter 6, tells us this, beginning in verse 31. He says, "Therefore take no thought, saying what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, or wherewithal shall ye be clothed? For all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth what ye have need of before ye ask them." He then says, and probably the most recognizable verse in this, verse 33, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God, and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." Then following up and concluding the chapter in verse 34, he said, "Take therefore no thought." Now again, that's a reference to worry or concern or stress. "Take therefore no thought for the morrow will take thought for itself, and the things of itself. Sufficient of the day is the evil thereof." Now friends, oftentimes when we consider this passage, we have to understand what God tells us not to worry about, what Jesus encourages us to steer clear of, and that is, don't worry. Don't worry about your food, where it's going to come from. Now that doesn't take away from the fact that we need to work and labor to gain it, but He tells us not to worry about it. He tells us also not to worry about your fashion, if you will, your clothing. He said, don't be worried about what you're going to put on. And then there in verse 34, He tells us never to worry about our future. Now, oftentimes we misinterpret or misunderstand, I suppose, verse 34. Let me try to give you an example or an application of it very simply. What God's saying here is that we have just enough things to worry about in each day to keep our days and keep them full. You know, imagine it like this. Imagine every day of your life, God gives you 10 problems to deal with. And within that same day, perhaps He gives you 10 solutions. Well, what He's saying here is, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. That is, you have 10 problems to deal with. I'm giving you 10 solutions, and that's all that you can handle. You see, when we worry, what we're doing is one of two things. We're either reaching back into yesterday and pulling forward a problem, giving us 11 with only 10 solutions, or reaching forward into tomorrow, giving us again 11 and only 10 solutions. And it's in that moment that we tend to fail. That's when we fall flat on our faces. We get all stressed out with nowhere to go, and the worry sets in. Friends, I encourage you, rely on God's Word, and don't worry about the things of tomorrow. Put your focus on God, and you'll never be willing to see anything but Him. This has been your Family Focus. Thank you.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that segment with Jim Murrell on worry. Certainly a subject that we as Christians need to think about, because we do from time to time fall prey to worry. And we serve a great God who's capable of taking care of all of the things that come in our life, and we need to put our confidence and faith in Him. I'm back with Stefan Darby, and he is the founder of Advanced Information Technologies, and he's also an elder in the Lord's Church at the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama. Stefan, we're going to continue our discussion that we began just a moment ago about pornography and how it's had an adverse effect because of technology, especially nowadays, upon the home. Before we broke, we were talking about some things that parents could do, and you mentioned how that there's some softwares that are out there and that are available that we can purchase a subscription on our laptops, on our desktops, and even on our mobile phones in order to protect our children from these things. I mean, parents, they need to be informed, do they not? I mean, isn't it kind of like giving a loaded gun to your child and not teaching them how to handle the weapon?
You know, that is so important, Barry, because a lot of times they don't realize what their children are doing within the home, and they certainly don't realize that they could be fueling an addiction that child is going to have to deal with their entire life, you know, as they grow into being adults. And so parents need to be aware of what their children are doing. Grandparents need to be, aware of what their grandchildren are doing within those homes.
Well, how does this addiction compare to other addictions, alcohol addiction, drug addiction?
You know, researchers tell us that pornography is even worse. And the reason why, if we think about a physical addiction, like you had mentioned, alcohol or drug abuse, there are programs, there are rehabilitation programs, and maybe call them detox programs, to where they take that element away from you. They take that alcohol away from you or that drug away from you, and through time your body is no longer dependent to that particular thing. And through time and through that process, your body learns that it can survive without that alcohol or without that drug. When you think about pornography, pornography etches an image within your mind. And you can go through rehabilitation, you can go through whatever programs are out there, counseling, but the fact of the matter is, even if you go through those programs, those images are within your mind. You cannot erase what is in your mind. So because of that, researchers say it is so difficult to overcome that addiction, because even though you may have a lot of time to try to overcome that addiction, those images are still in your mind, and it's easy for you to recall those images in the future.
And so really we're talking about a battle for the mind.
We are, and a lifelong battle, not just something that is going to affect somebody within a certain span of their life, and that's why you have to look at it as an addiction, and you have to take it so seriously, because it is a struggle that will be a lifelong struggle.
Well, I mean, is this an addiction that's gotten worse in latter years? I'm sure people have always struggled with sexual temptation, but I mean, would you agree or disagree that this is more so today, and why?
It has gotten worse, and it's gotten worse because, first of all, computers have become more and more popular within our homes. Just about every home has it. children are dependent upon using technology for school, if nothing else, to do research for their homework and the papers that they have to do. And then we have new devices now that have been popularized within the last couple of years, such as smartphones and tablets. You know, most households, they have an iPad or they have an Android tablet or they have an iPhone or an Android phone. And all a smartphone is a computer with a radio in it. So things that you used to could get to only through computers, you can now get to through a smartphone or through a tablet. So that opens up a whole new area that our children and our families can access pornography through.
Well, we've got a little less than 2 minutes left in this segment today, and I want us to just touch on some other areas that are related to this, and that is, in addition to the pornography potential there is for a child to get caught up into that, aren't there some other problems that technology similar to that has been created?
There is, Barry, and it's so important that we as parents and grandparents that we teach our children and we make them aware of the dangers, because they don't stop and think about those things. And there's numerous areas. One is in the area of sexual predators. You know, children post information through social media sites and maybe in chat rooms, chat sessions, very, very private information about themselves, thinking that the person on the other end is who they say they are. They say that they're a 15-year-old or a 12-year-old, when in actuality it may be a 40 or a 50-year-old sexual predator. Right. So children need to be aware of that. They also need to be aware of what they send as far as images and information, because chances are it's going to be shared. If a girl sends a boy an image, chances are he's going to share that image.
And we've seen situations like that where it's been reported on the news or you know, of something like that happening. Kids just don't understand. When it goes out there, it's out there, right? And
it is, and there are kids, you know, there are things like Snapchat and others that kids think are temporary, and they're even publicized as that, but the fact of the matter is they're not. That information is stored on servers. Those companies will tell you that, even though it may be for a finite amount of time, they're stored out there. There's also tools that can be put on phones to where a Snapchat image is preserved forever. So you're very naive to think that those are temporary.
I hope you enjoyed our program today as much as we enjoyed presenting it to you. Fabric of Family is brought to you by Churches of Christ in your area and in cooperation with Gospel Broadcasting Network and Sane Video Productions. And we invite you to visit with one of our sponsoring congregations as you have opportunity that are going to be listed in the credits to follow, or with a Church of Christ in your own home area, because you know the family matters, and that includes our church family. We look forward to being with you next time as we explore another timely topic designed to strengthen your family and ours. I'm Barry Gilreath Jr., your host, wishing you God's blessings and providential care until we meet again. Have a great week.
Let's make the most of a minute.
Speech on. Selected. Screen record.